Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Our program is about to begin. Please welcome Semafor's Andrew Friedman.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Semafor World Economy, Day 5. What a week it has been. I'm Andrew Friedman, General Manager and Head of Public Affairs and Corporate Partnerships at Semafor. And thank you all so much for being here today and for being part of this week. Semafor was launched 3 years ago at a time defined by information overload, eroding trust, and accelerating complexity. We set out, though, to provide the antidote: fair-minded, transparent, global intelligence for the new world economy. Semafor World Economy, what we're all here today for, it truly does bring that vision to life. It's now the largest gathering of global CEOs in America, convening more than 500 global CEOs, hundreds of top leaders across business and government from more than 89 countries annually here in Washington, D.C. Discussions you're going to continue to hear today, they are driven by Semafor's global newsroom, who've gathered here from our bureaus in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Gulf. Our conversations truly focus on helping leaders navigate extraordinary complexity by curating and surfacing the richest insights, ideas, and diverse perspectives on the new world economy. This morning's session, The Next Era of Innovation, brings together conversations on how the race to harness new scientific discoveries and emerging technologies is creating extraordinary economic opportunity, and what it will take to ensure this era of innovation is defined by both growth and responsibility. But before we get started, I'd like to express our gratitude to Citadel Securities for their partnership on today's session and for being the title partner for Semafor World Economy. We're truly grateful for their support in creating a space for independent, intelligent, live journalism. And with that, let's get to the news. Cheers, and thank you so much again for being here at Semafor World Economy.
Please welcome Ursula Burns of Teneo, 44th U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, and Stephanie Ruley of MS Now News.
You know, I was ready to leave yesterday, and then when I found out who I had with me, I was like, I'm going to stay for a month.
She's
ladies,
the best.
Thank you so much.
She's the best.
I am honored to be on the stage discussing anything with you, and it's super exciting that it is AI, right? At any time in history, there are innovations in science and technology, but AI is exciting people, it's devastating people, they're panicked over it. So let's just start with your general outlook. When you think about AI, you're optimistic, you're pessimistic, you're realistic.
Optimistic. Optimistic for humankind in areas like health and safety, any kind of efficiency. Optimistic because it will present opportunity to redefine things that we should have been redefining all along.
What do you mean?
For example, what work is, how we work, just what it is. Everybody's concerned about the number of jobs that whether we're going to have 5 people answering the phone or 1. I think we can step back and look even broader about phones. It allows us to redefine a whole lot, so I'm optimistic around that. And I'm optimistic because the status quo, even though I don't know what AI will bring, we do know that we're reaching the end of our capacity and capabilities with the status quo. We do things today that are just the way that we've done them because we had no options, so now this allows us options. Pessimistic, because we are not really good learners on the go forward. History should be able to tell us a lot about what's going to happen when we go through this change.
If we pay attention to it.
That's the pessimistic part, right? Give me a break, guys. We've done this, we started with enslaved people when we had the cotton gin. We put a whole bunch of enslaved people out of work. We had to make a transition. We knew this. We know this as well when we think about automated cars, right? So we should plan this a little bit more than we are planning it today. We still have these stovepipes of government and industry and unions in stovepipes when we should be in a room together thinking about what the heck is going to happen when I don't need call centers as much as I needed them before. So pessimistic about that. Overall optimistic, though, because we kind of don't have to screw this up. We can do it well if we pay attention to it a little bit more.
I am so sick. Just hearing them speak, I'm so happy to be sitting here. What are your thoughts?
You know, I agree. I am medium and long-term optimistic, but short-term worried.
Yeah.
And for the exact reason Ursula said, you know, when I think about what a well-trained individual can do with AI, it's exciting. You're more productive, more creative. I actually think we're going to see an explosion of new businesses. I think you see a lot of people making a living by starting their own business using AI. You're already starting to see it. So I'm optimistic about that, but it's a transition. I think it is an economic transition. I think we have a from-to problem. And the thing I'm really worried about in the next, call it, 1 to 5 years, you have AI coming down the track at a fast pace, which will be disruptive, and it's going to hit the brick wall of America's old-fashioned higher education system, total lack of workforce systems, and our old-fashioned career transition systems. I mean, what do we have in America for career transition? It's called unemployment insurance. It was created 100 years ago in the Great Depression, literally hasn't changed since. It's not going to work in an AI economy when, it was made for a different time. Put yourself in the shoes of a 54-year-old woman who's been a fill-in-the-blank, call center worker, paralegal, accountant, her whole career. Hey, Gina, sorry, your job's being automated. Here's 2 weeks severance. That is not going to work.
Well, we've seen the results of that. If you go through the coal, steel, go through these nations, these states that literally had to redefine themselves. And what we did as a society is we left them on their own.
Correct.
We said, we didn't even talk to them about retraining, about what do you do with your house if you live here, but the job is way over there now. Nobody left to buy. The system has to be reworked. The good news is that I think it's possible for us to do that. But there is really not an organizing force that does that. What do we say? Okay, let's organize and define the future of the workers in Kentucky.
But who? Because to that very point, right, when globalization hit and manufacturing jobs went overseas, we still feel the painful remnants of that. So as we're talking about reshaping the workforce of the future, who's responsible for that?
Okay, so put this in perspective. I'm right there. I'm picking up what Steph's putting down. But I want to remind this audience, I agree fully. I think our present violent, divisive, mostly dysfunctional government has its roots in the so-called China shock, which destroyed manufacturing jobs and whole communities. In that shock, it was a few million people who lost their jobs. Some people say 2 million, some people say 3 million. 3 million people dislocated. 35 years later, still paying
dislocated.
For it. Today, we're talking about, 20, 30 million AI vulnerable jobs. So I think I wrote a piece recently. It's time for a new grand bargain. Business has to be leading. If not driving the bus, leading. I've been in government for a long time. I'm here to tell you, government and government-funded worker training programs and even higher education, they don't know the skills needed for today and tomorrow. They don't. They don't, Steph. Who knows? Businesses. But here's the big problem we have now. Business has no incentive, really, to lean in.
They have a disincentive.
They have a disincentive. And by the way, I'm not anti-business. I'm the Commerce Secretary. I'm pro-business. And I know and like a lot of CEOs. These aren't bad people. But they fire 2,000 people today. Their stock price goes up tomorrow. Incentives.
Because that's what their job is, right?
I understand
that.
So change their incentives.
Who's going to do that? Because
government,
right now
governors.
The incentive
Any
structure
in this crowd?
is how do you pay your employees the least amount of money to keep them from quitting? How do you make sure your customers keep buying your product? And how do you keep your shareholders happy?
But
so
Steph, I am an old ex-CEO. Old and X.
We'll go with X. We're not agreeing to
X's
old.
CEO.
But let me tell you
That
what,
job's taken.
your definition of what CEOs are incented to do is, one piece of it is actually wrong. I used to say this to Gina all the time. People actually believe that we go home at night and say, let me figure out a way to give my value creators, the least amount of money.
But not in a terrible way. It's in a balanced way.
But I think we don't even think about it from that perspective. We are like, how do we get the best at whatever? Money never comes into the discussion until the very end. Literally, give me the best. Give me the best CFO. I'll pay whatever it takes to give me the best legal, just to clean up the mess. We are actually kind of human,
I'm not dogging on CEOs, but before an activist comes banging down your door to optimize
Don't worry about that much. I think that what we have to do is compete effectively, and we have all learned through some bad behaviors of our own and of the past that the best people in the best work environment, which probably will cost money, ends up with the best results. So we're willing to throw money after that value creation proposition. Now, the challenge becomes we are asked to be involved and engaged on certain topics, and then we're yelled at. More than yelled at, we are drummed out of office if we're engaged in other topics. And you can't have it both ways, right? We can't give me your opinion today, but shut up tomorrow. At least that's not the way I govern. All in all, business is better positioned to be a major actor in the solution than the government is. But we need an organizer, and the organizer has to be the government. The organizer of this this is one of the reasons why I know I'm kissing up a little bit, why I loved Gina as Commerce Secretary. And it was because it was about conversations about how we get all of us together, business, social organizations, organizing unions, whatever, and workers sitting in a room and saying, how the hell do we prepare for this? What we know is a big transition. How do we prepare? If anybody tries to do it themselves, we're going to have a lot of remediation needed at the seams, which takes time. And it's going to be wrong. It's going to be one-sided. We have to be together. This is where government actually has a role and can do a good role, could play a good role.
So the solution would be long-term strategic planning. How does one employ long-termism in a universe of short-termism? Yep. Because the government that we're talking about is going to be out of office, whatever the administration, they'll be out of office in the short term. That CEO we're talking about has to worry about quarterly results. So AI is going to transform every element of the way we live. So you need these long-term solutions in a completely short-term world.
Yeah, so I want a couple thoughts on that. I agree actually completely with what Ursula said.
Because she said you were great.
Especially that part. That should be foot stamped. But with one exception, I agree. Like, you talk to CEOs privately, they don't want to fire people. They don't want to lay people off. Like, they want to grow. But there is pressure. You know, you saw, we won't go through all the examples, you know, but you fire a lot of people today, you are rewarded tomorrow. So I think it's time to get through this AI transition. We have to be creative and urgent, and it's new policies. I talked about unemployment insurance from 100 years ago. We need new policies. What about, what about tax incentives for companies to incentivize them to retrain and redeploy? Mm-hmm. What about, frankly, employing people cheaper? You know, I'm not endorsing anything right here, but, you know, there's payroll taxes now. That's arguably a disincentive to hire a lot of people. Absolutely. Maybe what about an incentive to create entry-level jobs? My point is, I don't have the exact answers, but I know incentives are going to be a big piece of the puzzle. Higher education, honestly, they have zero incentive to produce people that graduate with the skills. Their incentive is to get butts in the seat. Someone shows up with their Pell Grant or GI Bill, the university gets paid. It's not outcome-oriented. So it's time for this. The place where I don't know if it's government, which answers your long-term question, First of all, as a former governor, I always bet on governors because they are less partisan, more practical.
They actually do work.
They do work. They have to. They have to get the job done.
You have to run the
You know what I
place,
mean?
yeah.
So I would bet on
Well, they live
governors.
in the town and the state
You
that they
live in
govern.
the
Governors and
town.
mayors.
They're almost always there for at least 8 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. They work bipartisan. They work, every governor, I don't care what shape, size, or party you are, you know all the CEOs in your community. So I think that's a good place. But I also think it's time for new sorts of institutions for exactly the reason that you said. Yeah, government has to change. I don't know if government's the right instigator because whoever is president today is not going to be in 5 years, whoever it is. So it's time, I think, for a new sort of institution with staying power that is that driver of a national movement to get this country ready for AI.
So when I hear you talk about this sort of collaborative effort, here's the challenge. These governors who are the best people to do it are hamstrung right now because as it relates to AI regulation, we now have the federal government or we now have AI lobbyists pushing to get state regulations off the plate so that the federal government can control it all. So we've even got infighting happening here.
Yeah. I think that just about everything we're speaking about, we're not going to be able to solve in this time or this room because it does require, if you think, stepping back and in some cases, I hate these words, kind of redefining the whole system, which then that means that nobody does anything, right? They just keep going. But I think take small chunks. If we can get governors to own the pieces that they can own, and I agree with you. If you have business, New York is a great example of this, California as well. Big states, lots of moving parts in the state and huge concentration of industry types, tech on the west, financial. If you can get these things to work around whatever the big problem is, it won't only be AI and it won't start there, then we can get models and learn ways to work differently than we do today. If we start with trying to solve the problem today, AI is going to be done and dusted, and we're still going to be chatting about who owns it. So I just think we have to kind of start something. If it's a governor, start it in a state that has a good governor with a lot of concentrated industry, and try models that allow us to change and bend the way it works. This ownership at the federal level and at the state level is a problem not only in tech, it's a problem in education, it's a problem in healthcare.
Everything.
It's a problem everywhere. You can't legislate healthcare that says literally a street differentiates whether you get paid or doesn't. I mean, that's ridiculous. So you do need some federal oversight, but you can't actually take the power away from the states either. So I say start small. Let's get some great governor with some great industries. Let's start working on some problems.
Yeah, practical.
Practical.
Yeah. I think by the way, right now Americans are very anxious about AI, right?
Yes.
And it's not diffusing with the speed that I think we want it to because people are
we're not
afraid.
explaining anything.
Correct. We're not
But part of
explaining.
it is that we don't know. I mean, people actually believe that there's this knowledge in companies about how it's going to look. We are scrambling just as much as the...
But don't you think if business leaders even told their employees that?
Yep.
Because now, if you look at many, many big companies, employees are like bracing themselves, thinking that somewhere on the 30th floor, there is a group of people just strategizing and they're going to come out 30 days from now and say, you've all lost your job.
Yeah, you're right,
And there's no communication with anyone.
It's unlike...
It's fear.
Yeah,
when people today... When the average American hears AI, they hear, I'm going to lose my job.
I don't know what my kids should study in college.
Bingo. Why am I paying all this money in college tuition? There's going to be no more jobs. So what I was going to say, back to the practical point, the first few times that an employer does a practical intervention, maybe with a governor or something, who says, we had 1,000 call center workers, we were on path to let them go. And by the way, their work is going to be automated. But we took that 1,000, we worked intensively with them, and we redeployed them. The first few times we do that, I think the temperature goes down.
We got to say it. We got to show it.
100%. We got to do it. Americans are anxious. They deserve more than talk. Yes, we have to talk. They deserve plan. They deserve action. I will say, I've been obsessed for some period of time about competition with China. I know Ursula cares about that a lot.
Maybe we should start a trade war.
We could. We have 6 seconds left in this panel. Why the heck not? But China, number one, is thinking long term, right?
They can. They have a long-term government.
They can. They have long-term government, not one that I would want. I don't want a repressive regime, but it's a long-term government. But number two, they're using AI, right? They have high unemployment. They're not sitting around fretting about it. They're using it.
Well, they don't care about their people.
I understand, and I don't want that. But when you say to me, hey, Gina, how do we win the AI global competition? It isn't just having the best chips in the world. She sits on the board of TSMC. It's not just the best chips, the best data centers, plentiful energy, great talent, the best models. That's table stakes. Mm-hmm. It's also, how do we get ready for this transition? Because I'm telling you right now, if we put 10 million people out of work in the next few years, we're cooked. Yeah. That ain't winning against China. You want to beat China, as I do, you need a tech strategy and a people strategy.
And an energy strategy and an education strategy.
Correct.
You need a strategy that knits it all together. One thing, I'm going to answer the question that nobody asked, but I'm going to do it. First of all, your kids should go to college. They should study whatever they're interested in studying. Very few people, unless you're like a doctor or now a data scientist, my daughter graduated with a degree in English. I mean, did I think she was going to get a job in English? No. So part of education is training. By the way, she has a great job.
And she speaks English.
Yeah, and she speaks English. My point here is that we don't have to change that quickly, and you don't have to panic that quickly. I mean, kind of stick to some of the roots that we know. Education is broad, that thing. Second is that it's very unlikely that a company will unemploy you tomorrow because of AI. It's very unlikely. It is likely that you will be displaced over time. Over time could be as short as 6 months. So start thinking today about, and you kind of know the work already. It's repetitive, programmable work, call centers, transaction processing, these things that we've been talking about forever and ever. I think if you're sitting still, waiting for that job to be saved only, I don't know how you prepare for this, but I think you're going to be disappointed if you're waiting for that job to be saved. So start thinking yourself, getting help, however you can do that, retraining, et cetera, et cetera.
I think the solution is obvious. Put ladies in charge of it all. Yes. Thank you.
I love you. You can run for governor.
Please welcome Secretary Sean Duffy of the US Department of Transportation and Semafor's Shelby Talcott.
Bright light, Shelby.
Yeah, I know. We've got good lighting this year. Yeah. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us at Semafor World Economy, second year in a row.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hopefully year 3 next year. I want to start with something we actually discussed last year, which is New York's congestion pricing program.
Did we talk about that?
We did. You were pretty outspoken against that program. It's obviously been implemented Recently, the MTA has argued that it's a success. The number of daily vehicles entering that zone is down 11%. There's an uptick in people using public transportation. They've gotten a lot of money in net tolling revenue. How are you viewing that now? Are you still against it, or do you think that it was actually successful?
Well, how do you judge success, right? So if you tax people to use your public infrastructure like they have, and they bring in revenue, they love that. That's a success for them. And then they'll say, well, we have more people, of course, riding the subway, and they find that to be a success too. The problem is, I do still find this to be a tax on the less financially fortunate. If you can afford to drive in the city and less people on the road, it is great for you. There's less traffic. You get in faster. It's a beautiful experience for those who have the cash to pay. If you don't have the money to pay, you're on a subway system which year over year, assaults are up by 60% on the New York subway with the MTA. Robberies are up 20%. And so you're forcing people to ride a system that many of them, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they don't feel safe riding. I would never send my 13-year-old daughter 7 o'clock at night on the New York subway. I just wouldn't. And so I do think it's fundamentally unfair, and to judge success by your ability to raise money and force people into a different system that they actually don't want to use, they want to drive, I don't find that to be successful. And it comes back to maybe the point I made last year. I do think that if you're going to have public transit, just this as a public policy matter, it should be beautiful. It should be a great system that's safe and clean. It shouldn't be a homeless shelter. It shouldn't be a place to congregate for criminals. It should be a public utility that is an awesome experience for the American people. And that's not what they offer. And it's not impossible. If you look at Washington, D.C., as New York's crime rates have gone up, New York, and again, they've had the benefit of the president and the National Guard who have helped with crime, but their crime rates have gone down. It's safer to ride the transit system in D.C., and it's less safe in New York.
I also want to ask regarding New York, there's a big debate right now there about driverless cars or Waymo. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, he seems to be more resistant about the Waymo effort. There's a lot of debate over it. The test permit has expired there. You've been more for this effort, arguing that it's essential in the race against China. I wonder how you view states' roles in this. Should mayors have the power to block things like this, and should the federal government be able to preempt these kinds of decisions? So,
first, yes, I think the federal government should preempt. I think we should set the standards. But now that we don't, New York has the right to say we don't want Waymo in the city, or we don't want Waymo in the state. And that's their prerogative. But I would just say this technology is coming. And my view is that we should help facilitate the innovation, and the innovators should be in America. The technology that's developed, I would hope, is deployed from America around the world as opposed to from China around the world. I think we should set the standard. But also, I'm a safety organization. So what we think about is how do we craft our rules where we make sure there's enough latitude for innovators to innovate, and also keep the passengers safe. And it's this balance. I kind of think of myself as Goldilocks. We have to get it just right. I don't want to hurt people, but I don't want to shut down the industry and make the innovators leave. And so it's an art, not a science, but that's what we're focused on. Also, we lose 40,000 people a year on American roads, and those are very stubborn numbers. And it used to be drunk driving. We still have too much drunk and drug driving, but phones have been a huge problem. They're distracting, and it's causing crashes and death and injury. I think this technology is going to save a lot of people.
What about the argument about jobs? That if Waymo and some of these other autonomous vehicles start becoming more popular, it's going to impact the taxi industry, the traditional sort of driver experience, Uber, Lyft?
I think you should have the choice. If you don't want to ride in an autonomous vehicle and you want to physical driver, you should. And if you don't mind driving in an autonomous vehicle, and you can compare prices, I mean, it should be the consumer choice. But I do think we are in for a lot of change, and this is not my topic, but if you look at what's going to happen with AI and the leaps and bounds that are happening right now, and if you talk to really smart people in this space, they'll say it's a year and a half, 2 years, at the most 4 years. Quantum computing, robotics. I mean, our world is going to change dramatically, I think, and it's going to be very disruptive. So this is not just going to be autonomy. This is going to be a broader humanity conversation that I think we're going to have because I don't think humanity has ever dealt with, in such a fast period of time, this kind of technology being put at our feet.
I also want to talk about air travel, which has been obviously a big conversation really for the past 14 months. Not always for good reasons. One aspect of this is the air traffic controller shortage. Last week, the DOT announced that it would be targeting gamers to try to increase those numbers. How are you convincing gamers to become air traffic controllers? And do you have an update on how successful or not successful this effort has been?
So you guys might think I'm crazy, right? You're like, well, gamers for air traffic controllers? This came about, we polled 250 random students at our academy, and only 3 of them were not gamers. We're like, there must be a correlation between gaming and people wanting to become air traffic controllers. So we've leaned into that community. We went live last night at midnight, and as of 7 o'clock this morning, we had almost 6,000 applicants. We are going to shut down the application process at 8,000. If we're not there right now, for sure we'll be there by noon. We've had a flood of people, young people coming in that want to be air traffic controllers. Again, they have to be qualified. We have to go through an assessment process, but this has been wildly successful. And if you think just what these gamers are doing on screens and they're talking, and there's a lot of things going on, they're used to that, and that's actually what you're doing in a tower, in a facility. And so they've become well suited from the games they've played to actually have a great life job that pays well and can support their families.
And how long from sort of the application process does it take somebody to get up and ready to become an air traffic controller? How soon can we see sort of significant impacts? Because there is a pretty big shortage right now.
So first off, it used to take 2 years from the date of application to getting a spot in the academy, give or take a few months. We have that down to 39 days. Application to get in a seat in the academy, so that's moving much faster. And then, once you graduate from the academy, you have to go to your facility and you have to get trained up, and oftentimes that can take anywhere from a year to 2 years to get trained up. So there's a lot of small pieces with air traffic control that there's not one silver bullet. We're working on bringing more controllers in. We traditionally had a 30% washout rate at the academy. There should be a washout rate, by the way, but it shouldn't be 30%. So if we can get that down to 15 or 10%, because we're getting better applicants in, so our throughput is better. I've asked air traffic controllers who are eligible to retire, I've offered them an upfront cash bonus of 20% to stay on the job. Then we let controllers, if you go from Chicago, you've been there for 12 years, it's a complicated airspace, and you want to move to Miami. So you're a great controller in Chicago. If you move to Miami, we're going to take you off a line for anywhere from a year to a year and a half to have you train up in the Miami airspace. So when controllers move around, I also lose I lose active controllers in the airspace in which they were trained. So we're thinking through all of this, but I think in a matter of several years, by the time President Trump's term is over, I think we can make up the shortage that we have right now.
I also wanted to ask you about the closure of El Paso's airspace in February. There were a lot of reports about why and what happened. It seems like Border Patrol hadn't totally coordinated with the FAA about its activities in the area. How has the DOT addressed that to make sure everybody is in the loop going forward, and why wasn't the White House notified about that?
So as an American, I want our military to have a lot of great tools that none of us know about. That's a really good thing. And if bad things happen, I want them to deploy, especially in this city, I want them to deploy those tools and keep all of us who are here safe. And there's other tools that if they're more commonly used, we have to make sure that those tools, when used and how they're used, can have their intended effect on their target, but don't have unintended effects in the airspace. And we have a role in that. And there was a few issues that took place. I'm not going to go into that, but our teams are working well together right now. And my job is to make sure that if you fly, you are safe. And I'm never going to cede that responsibility that's been given to me by the confirmation of the Senate and the president's nomination. I'm not going to cede that to anybody.
How long can TSA be funded through the big, beautiful bill?
So TSA, ICE was funded through the big, beautiful bill through 2028, but the president's executive order is funding TSA. But listen, it's wreaking havoc on Homeland Security, the non-funding. And what I get political differences. I spent 9 years in Congress. The problem is when you're leveraging the safety of the American people or you're leveraging air travel, I get that there's a political disagreement, but is this the appropriate forum in which to have that disagreement? I would say that it's not. And practically speaking, there was an election that we had a year and a half ago, roughly, but less than that. And this was a big issue in the election. What do we do with the 14, 15, 17 million people who came into this country under President Biden? What do you do with them? And President Trump ran on saying, well, I think we should send them back home. And then he sends them back home because he won and Democrats lost, and now they're trying to redo the election and say, well, we want to shut down the government because we don't want you to accomplish the goal in which you actually ran on and beat us on.
And so do you see this coming to an end anytime soon? Or because it is not tenable for the long term for this executive order to fund TSA?
I think, again, I get political pressures. I think there's a lot of political pressure on the left with Democrats. And my hope is that we don't have to have something really bad happen in this country before people come to their senses.
Are you concerned about that?
If we don't fund Homeland Security, of course we should be concerned. Again, people don't come to work. They're not in the office. That's a problem. And so all of us should say, well, either, again, if it's not a problem, well, why do we have Homeland Security? We're spending a lot of money on a department that doesn't need to exist then. But if you think that Homeland Security is important for American security and safety, well, then there's a risk if you don't fund it, and the people aren't on the front lines doing the work.
And to end, we've been talking a lot today about air travel because I think it's one of the big topics that the American people have questions on. There's clearly been a lot of issues, and I know some of it's blamed on Democrats, some of it's blamed on the bureaucracy. When can Americans expect to have sort of a prolonged period of a good travel experience?
Well, so that's a really good question. This is, when you look at air travel, first of all, my space is pretty bipartisan. There's not a Democrat road and a Republican bridge. There's not Democrat infrastructure and Republican infrastructure, or Democrat airports and Republican. It's American infrastructure. And so I'm in a really bipartisan space. I work really well with everybody. And this one, this has been a problem that's been burning for a long time that no one grappled with it, because as a safety organization, if you're going to update your systems while you're keeping planes in the air, that can feel unsafe. You can feel like that's risky. But the problem is if you don't actually do that, you're injecting even more risk into the system. And so right now, we're going to do a press conference on Tuesday. We got $12.5 billion from the big, beautiful bill. We will have all that money spent by the end of 2028. We're literally on copper, we're going to fiber, analog to digital, new radios, new radar, new voice switches, new terminals for our controllers, new surface awareness systems, new electronic flight strips, not the paper flight strips. All of that is really important. And if you think of the Potomac TRACON, we had a voice switch that started to burn, and fumes were being emitted. I mean, we're replacing those, but this is the infrastructure, but it can create risk. A little less than a year ago, we had outages in Newark, where controllers lost contact with airplanes for 45 seconds, which, by the way, doesn't seem like a long time, but it actually is a really long time in air travel when planes are moving so fast. And they know what to do when this happens, and everyone did what they're supposed to do. But then it took another 45 seconds for the radar to boot back up. So they didn't have a purview into the NAS for a minute and a half. So this is all that infrastructure is getting done, but the real juice on how I change your experience is the software. And we're working on late 1990s, early 2000s software versions. And just think about what we used. I mean, this is like the genre of Windows 95 or Windows XP, and how far we've come. So I need more money from Congress to do this part of it. But we have 3 companies in right now, and I know if we're over time, just give me a couple seconds because this is really exciting. We have 3 companies that are working right now with us on developing software to look at even how flights are managed. So if we can now use AI and look and say, well, in a month from now, we can look and see if we're going to have the way the bookings work, we could have all these flights arrive and all these departures scheduled all from 10 to 10:15. And if I have a rate of 100, well, I'm going to have 150, 170 in that time frame. Well, that's stupid because I have capacity before and after that time frame. So if I can get an airline to move their flight 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes back, or 5, 7, 10 minutes later, all of a sudden we spread out the capacity and you don't see the delays. And also we can see that, so controllers will see that 2 airplanes are going to come too close, and they'll take action and actually deconflict the airspace. This software, as they look at the flight paths, won't see that 15 minutes before it happens. They'll be able to see it, well, first of all, they could see it 30 days before, but it depends when these planes take off. They will see it in real time, and a controller will get a notice that they could change one of the airplane's flight paths slightly, and they can deconflict it an hour and a half, 2 hours before the conflict even happens. So this is really cool stuff that's going to truly change the experience. The FAA is actually doing an awesome job. And so this is what's coming. It's a matter of, do we get the resources for it? And my hope is, and this is the last thing I'll say, we can't get to the cloud because our system is so bad, but we're able to navigate what we do have for this equipment I'm talking about right now, this new software. My hope is that if I get the money from Congress, as we do the infrastructure build, we get fiber and we get digital, and we rework our network. As that's done, we're working on the software, and that's ready to be deployed, and they'll meet, and I can do them both together. And what was going to take 10, 15, 20 years to complete, which, by the way, would never be completed, is actually we're moving at lightning speed to fix this stuff. So it's exciting. We're working really hard. And again, I think it's important. I think America deserves to have a really complicated airspace, but the best airspace in the world. And when we finish this, we absolutely will. And the rest of the world is watching what we're doing, and they're going to try to replicate what we're doing. But we lead the way in aviation safety, in aviation technology. So this is cool stuff.
We're going to have you back next year for an update.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Please welcome David Cordani of Cigna Group and Andrew Edgecliffe Johnson of Semafor.
Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat. So we're meeting at an interesting moment. You've just announced that you're handing over as CEO after 17 years. You're going to remain executive chair of Cigna. That's about 10 years longer than most CEOs make it these days, on average. Just before we can dive into the Cigna story, how do you think you managed to get that longer tenure than most do?
Oh, beat the average, you mean?
Yeah.
First, very fortunate, right? It comes down to the organization, the team, our purpose, and harnessing that. I think if you step back, it's been an environment of just continuous change and innovation. We haven't operated it in one way, shape, or form. It's stable over any length of that duration. Coming off the financial meltdown of '08, going through the Affordable Care Act, changing economic environment, COVID, et cetera, the change, the innovation we've driven, and the growth has been tremendous. Today, we have the privilege of serving about 185 million customer relationships around the world. We started with about 40 million. Today, we have about $280 billion of revenue that is mostly service-based around the world. We started with about 18 billion. So to me, the constant purpose-driven corporation, harnessing that mission in terms of a very focused strategy, having great talent, and an environment of continuous change and innovation in service of our customers. And it's been a very fulfilling journey.
I mean, at the same time, your industry, it's very purpose-driven. It's not always seen that way from the outside world. And you did a piece of work last year looking at the sort of trust crisis in the industry. You run one of the largest health insurers, obviously, and a pharmacy benefits manager at Express Scripts. And last year, you tried to address this with a document called Commitments to Better. Can you explain what that was about?
So we stepped back and we challenged ourselves to listen in a very different way, even a more comprehensive way, to how our customers, how society, how our partners were feeling about us. And while we could point to many successes on average, we could see that on a highly personalized basis, there were moments that matter where we in the industry weren't stepping up to. So we came forward proactively with a voluntary commitment to better that had 5 major chapters to it. Ease access to care, expand support and services for those who are significantly in need in terms of heavy clinical complexity, increase value or reduce the point of service costs for individuals, take on greater accountability, voluntarily put a higher percentage of anybody who's bonus eligible in our company tied to customer and physician satisfaction. And 5th, and importantly, transparency. We voluntarily said we will issue an annual transparency report which shows how we're doing relative to this. And that became a further rallying cry in our company that harnesses that power of we're mission-based around improving health and vitality. We know we could do better. We need to be proud of the past. We need to listen and do better for tomorrow. But the core of it is it brings us to a much more personalized way that every product, program, and service we drive, we have to look at it through the consumer's moment that matter in their experience and work their way back. And even over the course of the year, we have bright spots to point to, but that's a journey. It's a continuum, which is why we've committed to having that transparency report as well.
Can you give us a bit of an update on the journey? How much progress do you think you've made in that year or so since you...
So I'll take an example. Well, first, our transparency report is out now, and we're proud of it. It's the first of its type. It'll evolve over time, and we'll issue it annually. If I come back to the front end, easing access to care, we can look at the environment and say 95% of all services have easy access to care. Unencumbered access to care, no prior authorizations or certain other services that are necessary in terms of coverage or safety or otherwise. We flipped it on its head and said, let's do 3 things. Let's systematically harness data and further reduce the number of services that have to go through that. So we've taken out about 15% of those services, round 1. 2, let's work to make it easy, seamless, and real-time harness information to be able to make those determinations seamlessly so no one knows that they ever transpired. 53% of all of them are happening real time right now. By the end of this year, 80% of them will happen real time. So reduce the volume, make them more real time, because safety is critical, because clinical care, because coverage policy. And importantly, the industry was able to come together around that and work with the administration, because public-private partnership is important here. We could do it for the commercial population. That's about half of America. But having Medicare, having Medicaid, having the public-private partnership. So it's a real bright spot. It's not completion. It's indication of the journey.
Right.
Making progress. We led. We worked with our industry partners. We worked with the administration. And you'll see more positive marks happen this year. In fact, in the near term, you'll see further positive marks come forward for the industry around this journey.
So this ties into our theme of innovation. You said in that transparency report that innovation has accelerated in your industry, but too often the result has been higher costs, not better experiences. Are you confident you're going to fix that, the cost part of it?
So when I think about innovation first, and I'll try to give you a concrete example, so back up the words. When we're driving disruptive innovation in our company, we try to do a few things. One, set a very audacious or disruptive goal. You know you're onto something when it causes the blood pressure and the excitement both to spike. Two, use time as an elixir to get clarity. Set really aggressive timeframes. It clears out a lot of the small stuff and it focuses on the big stuff. And three, wrap your best people around it. It's a cleansing event. Our commitment to better was done in 30 days.
Right.
We started from thought to public announcement in 30 days. So now come to affordability and innovation. We brought forth recently the first of its kind, and it's one of one right now in the marketplace, a new pharmacy services offering. Pharmacy has quickly gone from about 10% of the affordability equation for Americans to in excess of 25%. So pause for a moment. The pie has gotten larger because the overall cost equation is getting larger. The slice of the pie that's pharmacy is growing, and it's going to continue to grow because specialty pharmaceuticals are the fastest growing part of the equation. We stepped back and said, we need to do something different, we need to bring more value, and we need to be more customer-centric. And our newest innovation that we launched does a few things. One, it starts with the consumer in mind and puts us in their shoes to actively shop for, with technology, and optimize their out-of-pocket cost for every prescription they consume going forward. Whether it's our employer-based coverage or government-based coverage, whether it's a direct from pharmacy manufacturer, whether it's a government program like Trump RX, whether it's an independent smaller organization that is boutique around DTC. We could scrape that in seconds, settle it for the consumer at the pharmacy counter or at the virtual. That's a game changer. And on brand drugs, it will save the consumer on average 30%. 10% of all drugs in America are brand. 88% of all costs are brand. Let me repeat that. 10% are brand. 88% of the costs tie to that. The other 90 are generic. They're only 12% of the cost equation. Then we worked upstream and we flipped everything on its head. We said the model will be built with the pharmaceutical manufacturers with no rebates. The system has been built for decades with rebates. No rebates. Not pass-through rebates, not point-of-service rebates. They're removed from the equation. No spread pricing, that's inflation-related pricing. And then lastly, we step back and say data-driven. Throughout America, there are many independent pharmacies that exist in rural or semi-rural locations that may be the only distribution point around in that zip code. We need to step forward and reimburse those organizations higher. We need to support them with administrative services to make their operations more viable, because if you live in that zip code, your access to care is either yes or no. 95% coverage doesn't matter to you, it's yes or no. So that innovation is extraordinarily disruptive because it takes the conventional wisdom of decades of how the model has worked and flips it on its head. And just amplifying it back, it starts with the consumer and provides peace of mind that the consumer will always pay the lowest possible out-of-pocket cost. It'll be coordinated in their benefit program as opposed to out-of-pocket. The safety checks will be coordinated electronically. The care coordination data flows will be coordinated, and we have the technology to pull all that together. That's positive innovation through the consumer's lens.
How much of these cost actions would you have taken without pressure from the Trump administration?
Could you repeat that?
So how much of these cost actions would you have taken without pressure from the administration?
I believe that our track record would show, because you asked about the 17 years, we've disrupted the model multiple times. So let me step back. And the Trump administration's emphasis on affordability, we align with. So I'm not distancing, I'm leveraging. The affordability challenge in America and around the globe is significant and will remain significant. There are reasons. Demand keeps going up, the cost of supply keeps going up. Come back in 2019, April of 2019, we rolled out the first of its kind insulin program that capped the cost of insulin at $25 a month, period. We flipped it on its head. We said, it needs to be affordable because the data is indisputable. If you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, if you ration insulin for affordability's sake, you are worse off and society is worse off. We have to flip it on its head. So we've stepped into this void time and time again. The amplification of the affordability challenge accelerates the pace of change. The amplification of it by the administration brings more partners to the table to think differently, whether it's in the fertility space, especially pharmaceutical space, or otherwise.
And big picture, how do you meet the affordability challenge while defending your margins?
So when you think about the margin piece of the equation, we're a service-based company. 80% of all the clients we serve in the United States are medium and large size employers and small size employers for which we do what's called ASO, or service-based relationships. What I mean by that is we do not profit because of lower medical costs. We are aligned. There's transparency around how the money is being spent, where it's being spent, the clinical quality, the service quality, or otherwise. So we're more in a service-based relationship. Point two, our margins have been static to decelerating over the last half a dozen years. And in fact, we've been very clear that our value proposition back to Wall Street is one of growth. That the more value we're able to create, we have to pour that back into the market, to our employers, to governmental financiers, to individuals, et cetera. So defending our margins is relatively easy. My margin as an enterprise is 4%. It's 4%, and we're a capital-intensive industry. So I'm not going to shy away from that. That is a fair return for an organization that is performance-based. And we embrace transparency with our clients, employers, with governmental payers, with value-based providers going forward. So we try to lean in to say, transparency, I don't want to hide. We want to open up because it accelerates innovation and accelerates alignment.
Right. So stick with this, the theme of innovation. At a high level, what's been the biggest impact of AI within the business?
So as I think about the promise of AI, and I believe our industry, I believe many industries, but I can speak to ours, I think our industry is at the earliest phase of potentially harnessing the power. When we think about ours, and I'll come back to specificity here in a moment, we think about AI in three major tranches. One, how do we do what we do today better, faster, more efficiently? So speed is good, quality improvement is good, efficiency is good, especially when I'm returning the efficiency back in terms of improved affordability. Bucket one. Bucket two, speed, precision, and personalization. I want to come back to that one in a moment. There's massive promise there. Third is net new. AI presents the opportunity for us to stand up solutions in weeks that may have taken me a year in the past, working on old, big hardware, et cetera. We could conceptualize and stand up new subscale and moderately scaled solutions literally in weeks. Let me come back to the middle because there's a lot of promise. If you step back and look at the way health services have worked on average around the globe, the operative word is on average. Mostly every solution, whether you're in an OECD country and dealing with a socialized medicine, whether you're in Medicare, Medicaid, the employer-sponsored marketplace, the individual exchange, solutions are designed on average. Average coverage, average access profile, average communication interaction tools, et cetera. Nobody's average.
Right.
AI presents an accelerated way to bring much more speed and precision and therefore personalization. And in doing so, you create more points of delight and engagement for the consumer, but you also could take unnecessary costs out of the equation and channel more costs to the highest impact areas that benefit that individual. So the promise around more speed and personalization is phenomenal. It is phenomenal.
And one of the things AI speeds up is prior authorization. But there's quite a lot of concern about, algorithms denying claims, and obviously every denied claim is a potential trust issue for you, a threat to customer trust. How accurate are these models versus the human judgment?
I can't give you a mathematical answer to that. Everybody's dealing with different dimensions of accuracy. To your macro point, we only use AI when it comes to access to care or clinical to find accelerated pathways to yes. It is not used in any way to find an answer to no. That has to have a human intervention. So today, from a prior authorization standpoint, we've been able to go from a low percentage to well over 50% of the 4% of services that go through a prior authorization. So think 96% don't, they go straight through. 4% go through a prior authorization. Over 50% of them right now are happening real time. AI helps that in terms of immediate determination. Within months, it'll be 80%.
Right.
right? So that's pathway to yes, which typically requires the necessary information to flow through. So work is being done to get the necessary information, but it's not used in any way, shape, or form for clinical determinations or saying no. There's a wall there.
Are you not using it as a pathway to know because you don't fully trust the technology or because patients don't trust it?
I'll take our accountability first. And there's doubt. In fact, if you step back, recent data shows that the US versus any other OECD country, other OECD countries or developed countries have net more optimism around the positive contribution of AI versus the negative ramifications. This is not a healthcare comment, it's a broad societal comment.
Yeah.
The US, we have a little bit more dour view in terms of a little bit more pessimism versus not. For us, it's fit for purpose.
Right.
It comes back to fit for purpose. And this is a case where the speed and the precision is enabling. We measure the consumer points of delight through Net Promoter Score or otherwise. So it's not that guided us. It was fit for purpose on the front end. And we see it as an accelerant to getting to yes, expediting real time, making those determinations up front, providing value-added guidance.
Right. I want to come back to the leadership question. The entire industry, everybody was shocked by the murder of Brian Thompson, one of your peers, less than 18 months ago. What did that require of you as a leader running a health insurer at that time?
Probably one of the more challenging moments, right? Because time stands still when that happens. So you step back and you get clarity of priorities. Priority one, safety of your colleagues. Priority one, safety of your colleagues. Go back to basics. Priority two, ensure access to care is not disrupted in any way, shape, or form. In any challenging environment, that's the next order of priority. Downstream are there economic considerations to process through? So once the immediacy of the shock begins to be digested, you spring to action, you see either the best of or the most challenging environment of leadership coming together and getting clarity around that. Brings people closer together in terms of the purpose-built structure. You see the human support that plays through, and then clarity of action. Within a month after that, our commitment to better was in the marketplace.
This was why you had the 30-day deadline.
An accelerant of us taking it and turning it to a series of action on a go-forward basis. But back to you asked the leadership question, one of the more challenging environments I've confronted as a leader. Yet, when you reflect back on it, it was easy and clear because once you clear away the fog and say your job is to ensure safety with everything possible and ensure access to care, your priorities are quite clear. And then use it as a way which we challenge ourselves to listen differently and more comprehensively from a societal standpoint and turn it into a cause for action.
Yeah.
And it became a propellant for our organization.
Just want to end on another thing you've been deeply involved with. You chair the Business Roundtable's Workforce Mental Health Initiative. What are you telling CEOs they should be doing right now to boost mental health in the workforce?
So I appreciate spending a moment on this. And it's less telling, it's more engaging. So pulling back, in America today, about 90% of all of our costs. So it's a $5 trillion plus healthcare ecosystem. About 90% of all costs tie to a chronic disease or mental health. 75% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. We have a health challenge. And when you look at the interdependency, I apologize, I use my hands a lot, of physical health and mental health, in many cases they're inextricably linked. For all too long, we separated them. So from an employer standpoint, where half of Americans get access to their care through the employer-sponsored marketplace, it's elevating the awareness of how mental well-being is highly correlated to physical well-being and how both are correlated to workforce effectiveness. An employer needs healthy, productive, present, highly engaged coworkers. Simple. Hard to achieve, but you got to get regrounded on it. And you need to understand the physical well-being and mental well-being of your coworker and their family unit. And if the mental well-being goes unaddressed, it will create an effect on those coworkers around that individual and reduce productivity, engagement, effectiveness, etc. Turnover goes up, productivity goes down, etc. So whether you enter the door through a capitalistic mind or you enter the door through the most humanistic mind, you come back to the same place. Elevate awareness, flip it on its head, approach it, maybe if you're a manufacturer, the way you approach workplace safety in the past, amplify it and elevate it, have it permeate the organization. Hence, a bunch of employers went through mental health first aid training, be able to see it early on. So the activation of the employer community around this has been phenomenal, and it's one of the strengths of the United States ending, where harnessing that employer population and the micro communities they create a propulsion relative to overall health and well-being.
Good to end on that note. Thank you very much, Dave.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Please welcome Jean-Frédéric Paulson of Ferring Pharmaceuticals, Satish Reddy of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, and Amna Nawaz of PBS NewsHour.
Have a seat. Good morning, good morning. Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Thibaut. Thank you for being here. So we're going to start jumping right in here. And for anyone unfamiliar, I would love if each of you would just take a minute and tell us about your company so we can jump into more of the details. Satish, you start us off.
Sure. Thank you, Amna. Pleasure to be here. My name is Satish Reddy. I represent a company, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. It's a 40-plus years company based out of India with its major market being the United States. It's also listed on the NYSE under the stock ticker RDY. It's largely known as a generic company, but we're also across the value chain, all the way from raw materials, APIs, all the way up to discovery. Thank you.
Jean-Frédéric, over to you.
Thank you. So Ferring is the first true biotech company. It was founded 75 years ago by my grandfather, and we were the first company to synthesize the manufacturing of peptides. And today we're a global pharmaceutical company. We're sold in 100 countries, and our therapeutic areas are fertility, gastroenterology, and uro-oncology.
So we're here to talk about the new era of innovation. So Satish, let's start with you because you've already helped transform the company into not just one of India's leading pharmaceuticals, but a global pharma firm. And you've talked about the digital transformation initiatives that you've been implementing. So tell us about that. How have those been implemented? How have they changed the way that you work?
Sure. So it's made a tremendous difference in terms of how we operate as a company, because since the time we embarked on the digital transformations, which is quite a few years ago, we initially started with manufacturing. Interestingly, it's more about automation, especially on the production of the machinery, also on the quality control. That's how it started with, but steadily with the advent of AI. So that's when we started using that in various parts of the company, all the way from the front end, because we have so many medical reps who call on the doctors. It's about, for them to smartly select the doctors and also which brands to promote. So it would be at that end. But the biggest value, what we have seen, is in the development of products. So in terms of identifying the products, in terms of choosing which product to take it forward, which route of synthesis, all these things have seen a tremendous improvement, almost on a certain scale, improvement for us to be more productive, much more cost efficient, and also speeding up the process of manufacturing and taking it at scale.
Are there new reasons or new uses for AI that you're looking to implement now, things you're testing out?
Lots more, because it's an ongoing process, because there are several parts of the organization which we would like to implement. That's why I said initially there's a lot of value in the development and also scaling up for manufacturing. That's where we started with. But then we'll take it across the organization in various initiatives, also into the market, because there's even digital health that itself gives scope for a lot of things to be done.
Jean-Frédéric, what about you? For such a storied company with such a legacy behind it, what are your innovation goals now that you've recently stepped up as CEO?
Yes, so we just entered into a new phase of growth for our company, and we really want to leverage our global footprint, our global manufacturing footprint, our global commercial footprint, and launch late-stage innovation across the world, starting from the US, looking at specialty pharma in particular, and we're really refocusing towards these sort of more niche indications where we can really make a difference.
Why start in the US? What's the goal there?
So the US is the largest pharmaceutical market in the world. I think it's the market that prices innovation the most. And so it's really the logical play, even for us as a European company, to start our innovation from the US and then from there go global.
That's interesting because we hear a lot about the regulatory burden that a lot of companies face in the US. That's not a hindrance to you and what you're trying to do?
No, I think that's part of our industry, the regulatory burden, and of course it's something we need to deal with, but starting it in the US is definitely something that will continue to be our priority.
What about you, Satish? When you look at the regulation differences, you obviously operate across the entire planet. Is the US easier or harder in many ways to deal with, to market, sell?
So for us, the US being the largest market, it's also the gold standard for us. Because again, since we operate in almost about 80 countries, the regulatory pathway, the regulatory compliance, all these things are different in different countries. Also with India, certain of these complexities are in the evolving stage, but then we treat US as the standard. So, and also because we're in the business of generics, so for us it's about proving bioequivalence. So for this there's a very standard procedure, and once you hit it off in the US, it becomes a cakewalk for the rest of the world.
Yeah, and if I just add, one of our therapeutic areas and technologies are the microbiome, and we actually the first ever microbiome product approved by the FDA was our product a few years ago. And if you look at the regulatory space in the US versus Europe and the rest of the world, they are really clear about what they want, and because it's a very innovative therapeutic area, and so they give us much more clarity, in fact, than many other jurisdictions. So it's actually a very good place to innovate.
When it comes to, obviously, the goal, the use of the products to improve the lives of others, right, globally in particular, Satish, you mentioned the generics production. In terms of global public health and supporting what a lot of people talk about now is a goal of democratizing pharmaceuticals, right, the equal access and equal distribution. How does your firm approach that? How do you look at that?
Sure. Interestingly, our firm is based on this whole purpose of accelerating affordable medicines through innovation. So that's the purpose of the company, which was set by my father, who founded the company, Dr. Reddy himself. So when it came to one of the recent pandemics, the COVID, that was something that was a test of the whole purpose on how we live our values, because we went through with the vaccine. We also went through with various therapeutics during that time. We also, interestingly, in terms of providing access, had a license from Gilead for remdesivir at that time. So it was a quick regulatory approval that we got, following the process, and then we were able to launch it. So that gave us an experience, to be able to serve millions of patients at the time of crisis. And that's something we also lived true to our purpose at that point of time. So that led us to also look at public health, especially in developing nations, much more closely. And we are here today, where we have recently signed up, it's a public news about lenacapavir, the anti-HIV drug, that we again have got a license from Gilead. And again, through partnership with Clinton Foundation, we are taking it across almost 120 countries. We similarly have a kind of an arrangement with the Gates Foundation, where we take the injectable contraceptive, especially to the African countries. So it's about improving access. Our margins are not the same as compared to the regular business. It's somewhat lesser, but in terms of the impact we create, it's huge in terms of reaching billions of patients outside.
I mean, I want to ask more about the partnerships in a moment, but you mentioned the pandemic, and I'm just curious how, in an emergency time, under emergency measures, you were able to reach so many of the goals that a lot of organizations, a lot of governments say they're trying to reach. Did any of them stick, or is everything rolled back to non-emergency measures now?
Oh, obviously, it was rolled back to non-emergency measures, but there are quite a few lessons which even the policymakers, interestingly, have learned about what was done during the pandemic. Because as an industry, we keep pointing it out, saying that if this was done during a pandemic, why can't it be normal course of business? right? So certain things were accelerated, so during the pandemic, which was fine, but some of the things were rolled back, but they kept the good things, which was happened during the pandemic, which majorly cut approval times and also helped us get the products faster into the market. So that was a good lesson.
John Frederick, how did the pandemic change how you worked, if at all?
Well, we don't have products that are addressing necessarily the COVID problem in that sense. It has changed our logistics. It has changed, of course, the working from home policies and all of these. But fundamentally, I think we remain the same.
And what about in this environment? I mean, we've had a lot of conversations across a lot of industries about supply chain hangups, about the energy prices rising dramatically. How have those affected your business, and what are you doing to navigate that?
Right now, we're still navigating it because, especially as you know, the oil, the passage of oil, and India is very dependent on oil. What has happened is the solvents, which is very key ingredient for making the APIs, which is a starting phase for pharmaceuticals. Those prices have gone up tremendously, and then because we also have certain price controls in the market for the finished dosage. So we're not able to pass it on to the consumers and then be comfortable. So there are various steps being taken by the government in discussion with the industry to see what can be done to mitigate the risks of what has happened. Obviously, all of us hope this whole situation will come to an end and things get back to normal, but it will take a few months. And there's a bit of a discontinuity that we have seen. But fortunately, I think in discussion with the policymakers, we hope to solve most of the problems. And this actually teaches us a lesson that's saying that, especially when we keep talking about supply chain resilience, there's a lots of work to be done in terms of diversifying our supply chains, in terms of also making sure that we also use some level of innovation to also reduce the dependency of some of the materials to see what can be done to mitigate the risks. Otherwise, this problem is not something that will end easily.
John Frederick, what about you? Or the current situation, is it leading you to have to raise your prices or consider that?
Yes, definitely to consider that. But I think my father had a great foresight 20, 30 years ago to set up a global manufacturing footprint. So we have actually manufacturing sites in 15 different countries. And so that really allows to balance the sort of challenges that are emerging.
Satish mentioned the partnership earlier with other organizations, and I wanted to touch on a little bit of news that you had to share this week about a partnership. We should note, too, that you are a sponsor here at the Semafor Summit, but a partnership with Gallup in which you're seeking more information essentially about fertility across, 70 different countries? Tell us about that and why that's important to your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So fertility is a global challenge. Actually, as the leading fertility company in the world, reproductive medicine company in the world, we find great purpose in this work. And so really, what we see is that the fertility rates are going down. They're going down drastically everywhere, historically in developed economies, but now in emerging economies as well. And we see it, but we don't really understand why. And so really we wanted to partner, and this was about 2 years ago. I was at Davos, and I had a side conversation with the CEO of Gallup, John Clifton, and we came up with this idea to add this to their global poll, some questions, very targeted questions to understand why this phenomenon is continuing and what we can do about it.
What do you hope to be able to gain from that? I mean, have you had that level of insight and information before guiding your work?
Well, I think we do this because we want to help our human race to understand what is going. It's not purely or necessarily a commercial exercise. It's really to understand the trends of the world. If you look at, for example, Korea has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. They have 15% of their births that are IVF. It's 15%. One of the highest, yes. And you compare this to the US, where it's less than 3%. So there's tremendous growth still, of course, to address some of the fertility issues with the IVF solution, which we are a big part of course. But there are macro trends that go perhaps beyond that as well, and I think we owe to the world to understand better.
Satish, you mentioned some of the partnerships with organizations we're all familiar with. Largely, I would say, non-governmental organizations, right, foundations and private groups. How do those usually come about? Are those organizations coming to you saying we need to work together? Do you approach them? And what do they allow you to do that, say, working directly with a government would not?
Right. So, like I mentioned earlier, it all started with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And as a company, we decided to do something for the public health. So that was something which we had an understanding internally. And when we started approaching organizations, so we approached, right? So, and then looked at various things, because Gates Foundation, for example, does a lot of work in India. They also have partnerships prior to that. So that's something which was, worked out well for us, because when we approached them, we looked at, various possibilities, and that's where we zeroed in on this, injectable contraceptive for the African countries. That's what we started with. And then Gilead, we had a relationship also because of remdesivir during COVID. So we were quite up there up front with them, saying that any new development that takes place, that we would be more than willing to take it across to countries because of our experience, one in the past of working with the Gilead, and also our access to most of these markets because we're already present there. So that's something which worked out really well. As far as the government is concerned, we also did work with the government of India during a pandemic. In fact, one of the leading scientific research organizations called the DRDO, the Defense Organization, they had a particular product which we had licensed long back for oncology. But then during some initial tests, it also had some activity on COVID. So we actually developed it along with them, did the clinical trials and got it into the market. So even with the government at different stages, there is some level of discussion going on, but especially with non-governmental organizations, it's much faster, especially the global organizations.
Yeah.
It tends to gain more traction.
And are there policies that you're pushing for right now, not necessarily with the Indian government, with a number of governments you work across, that would help to make it easier for you to get your products in the hands of more people?
Absolutely. So as far as the policy is concerned, one is on the regular business itself. There's a lot of discussion which takes place between India and other countries.
Yeah.
Especially bilateral free trade agreements and things like that. In those areas, one of the key steps is always registration of products, right? So how to make it simpler, how to also allow access, through faster approval timelines is something which is always right on top of the table. Because if that problem gets solved, in terms of being able to bring those products into the market, that becomes pretty good. Second part is also about tenders, which we have to participate. Right? So in a lot of places, because of protectionism and whatever could be other reasons, there tend to be some kind of restrictions. So that's where we take the help of the government to also provide waiver for us to participate in those tenders and actually, impact people.
Jean-Frédéric, how do you look at this idea of partnerships? Do you partner in a similar way as Satish and his firm do?
Yeah, we have one partnership we're particularly proud of with the WHO to address a major concern, which is postpartum hemorrhage, which is women and mothers, in fact, recent mothers that die because of bleeding at birth. And so we came up with a drug in our research that allowed for a room temperature stable drug to address this. Because 90% of the 70,000 deaths are actually in lower and lower middle income countries. And so we partnered with the WHO, and they helped us register this drug everywhere. And we provide the drug at our cost, and then they distribute it to address this major issue. And we've seen some very great successes and delivered over 1.7 million doses across the world last year.
Incredible. And just to look ahead, the results of the poll question, people can expect to come out when? This will be in next year's?
It will be next year, yes, 2020. It will be the 2027 poll. So we're preparing the questions now.
Yeah. We'll look ahead to that. We'll have you back and talk about all this again. Please join me in thanking Satish Reddy and Jean-Frédéric Paulsen. Thank you both.
please welcome Jason Trost of Smarkets and Yinka Adegoke of Semafor.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. We're going to talk a little bit about markets and prediction markets, and I just wanted to, you've been in this space for 17 years, which is kind of like just fascinating. I mean, what people are they're calling it prediction markets today. What do you think is defining what you are now? Right? I mean, how do you position Smarkets today?
Smarkets is a financial technology. We're based in London. We've been around for 18 years. I started in the prediction market space about 20 years ago. When I was a 23, 24-year-old kid trading stocks, I came across a website that lets you trade the presidential election. And I thought, this is really cool that you could see the outcome of the election. This was the John Kerry, George Bush election. And you had this real-time indicators trading between 0 and 100%. And I thought, my God, this is such a fascinating way to follow the news. But I have a background in computer science. I was a stock trader. I thought the interface was really poorly done. So I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's led to the creation of Smarkets. So I position us as a financial technology. We happen to trade binary options. Eventually, down the road, we would like to trade other asset classes. But right now, we focus on binary options.
I mean, so Europe currently treats this space, prediction markets, as gambling, and the US kind of sees it as a commodity. Who do you think has that right? Which jurisdiction has that right?
Well, I think there's a lot of nuance with this word gambling. It's a word that we throw around. Everybody thinks that they know what it means, but I think when you really think about the word gambling, the way I would define it is somebody that has an intent for a recreational trade, where investing is an intent to make money. So I would argue the difference between gambling and investing is about intent. And when we use gambling in common language, we tend to overestimate and think about it being the underlying activity. And I think that's one of the mistakes that's going on in this industry, because with a broad brush, calling it gambling or investing is overly simplistic, and I don't think gets to the heart of the matter. If you take a sports bet or a prediction market bet on a US election, what have you, at the end of the day, you can gamble on it and you can invest on it. There's people that own professional football clubs in the UK that are professional gamblers, and I would argue that they're investing in sports betting. And there are people that gamble on the stock market. So I think this nuance is really important when we're trying to think about how do we regulate this. If you're asking the question, is prediction markets gambling? Yes. Is prediction markets investing? Yes. Is Wall Street investing? Yes. Is Wall Street gambling? Yes. It's all these things, and you can do all these things. And I think once you get that clarity of framework, then you can really drill down to the underlying asset class, which is, why is it bad? Why is it good? And I would argue the bad part of prediction markets and any financial market, to be honest, is the transaction fees and the bid-offer spread that you pay. And that's why the sports betting industry and some aspects of the prediction market world get a bad rap.
It's funny that you say the thing about, which is investing versus gambling. I was thinking about that from a journalist point of view, where so many of the headlines we write in business stories are, Walmart bets on such and such investment. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's kind of in there. When you think, in the US states have sort of different approaches to this, right? So some are really pushing back, in particular on one of your passions, which is politics, right? There's a real concern about election prediction markets. Do you think political contracts should be legal everywhere, or is there
100%. I mean, if I were a state, I'd be trying to regulate it too, because it's taxes and control and all those kinds of things. But when I first saw that the CFTC is regulating this, I had the reaction that probably a lot of you in the room had, which is it doesn't really make sense in a CFTC framework. But I think if you view it from an intellectual lens and try to remove this moralizing that we all have around this word gambling, it does make sense under a CFTC framework, I think. So I do believe that that is the right place for this to be regulated. A lot of the states are treating this like casinos. I've applied for state licenses in 3 different states. We're applying for 4 more. They basically treat you like you might be in the mafia. They ask you 20 years of history, who's your neighbor, what did you last watch, do you like Godfather or not? And it's really funny trying to think, like, I'm a financial technology company, I'm trying to make this rational, like, I'm not in the mafia, and these state regulators really approach it like you're a land-based casino. So even though I think they have good intent and they mean well, I think the state framework for this industry is the wrong one.
I mean, and then when you think about it from the national, the federal kind of level, the CFTC has created a separate lane for prediction markets here in the US. Is that a market you want to enter this way? I mean, you're kind of obviously already here in Indiana, I think you said?
We have a sports betting license because up until relatively recently, the CFTC framework was not open. And that regulatory lane is now open, and we're in the process of applying for that. Our application was accepted by the CFTC, and that's now pending. So we're in the process of expanding markets into the United States. We're very excited about that.
Tell me a little bit about that expansion. How do you see that going? Will this market almost certainly be bigger in what sort of time frame?
Well, I've been doing prediction markets for about 20 years, and there's a lot of really important aspects of it. But I think with this hype cycle that we're all in, there's kind of a craze going on right now, whether it's mention markets or some distasteful markets around war contracts. And I really think this industry needs an adult in the room. Some of these contracts are just crazy, like the Steve Bannon mention contract at this conference. I don't think you should have those contracts. It's in very poor taste. I think it's bad for the industry. Just to level set everything, the core economic driver of prediction markets is sports betting. Let's be very honest about that. I think that's absolutely fine. Sports betting is an $80 billion industry around the world. I think it should be disrupted with market-driven dynamics. I think bookmakers steal money from people, and I think the best way to democratize sports betting and to give people a fair shake is to use market-driven dynamics. So let's be clear, 90% of the energy, economic output, and revenue is going to come from sports betting. Intellectually, and probably more importantly to this room, I think prediction markets can be a very important tool for the news. That's how I got into this industry, starting back with this John Kerry thing. If you really think about all of the interest in the news, whether you're reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or Semafor, you're not really trying to look at the past. What I think the underlying motivation for reading the news is trying to prognosticate the future. We are obsessed with the future. What's the weather report? Even your horoscope is people trying to get an insight into what's going to happen. We're obsessed with that. Like, what is going to happen? What's going to happen in this world? And I think prediction markets are one of the best tools that we have to prognosticate the future. And I don't want to see this industry cluttered with crappy markets.
Where do you draw the line, just in terms of, like, you mentioned horrific things, people betting on wars, and for you, and you also talked about being the adults in the room. Where do you draw the line? What's your kind of red line on this?
There's a pragmatic side that you need liquidity in all these markets. So the more you stretch out the surface area of prediction markets, the harder it is to have liquidity in that. So there's a practical consideration. You can't have 1 million markets in prediction markets because you need buyers and sellers to come together, and there's liquidity dynamics and all those kinds of things. But in terms of what markets you should have, I think taste, morality, a point of view come into play. It's sort of the same framework that a journalistic lens you would have. Should I write a story about this? Should I write a story about that? And so we try to shoot it down the middle, like you guys, and not be too out there with the markets that we're creating. Because I also think that the competitors that are in the marketplace right now, as I've said, are putting up markets that I think are beyond what they should be putting up.
So you think that's just what you mean by shooting down the middle is, just don't take these extreme bets.
Well, anything that kind of gives you an ick factor, I don't think you should have a market on it. So whether it's like personal harm or somebody will suffer from it, things like that, I think are.
So it's really like a common sense.
Yes, I think a lot of it's.
And how are you making those kind of decisions? Because I just imagine so many calls are coming in all the time. People trying to make.
We've been doing this for 18 years, so we've kind of. We have the history to kind of, we figured this out. Early days when we were the only ones putting up some of these markets, we had debates internally. Is this market okay? Is that not market okay? Right. So a lot of, for example, like Harvey Weinstein, like the case, like, should you put up a market on that? Like somebody might go to jail, basically, if they're found guilty. And so you got to be very careful before you put these markets up.
So Kalshi is coming into your core markets where you're very strong, obviously the UK and Europe. How are you building a sort of defensible moat against that? Is there any?
Every day I'm hustling.
Every day you're hustling. What's your approach?
Got to work hard. Got to work hard. Make customers happy. I think we have a different approach than them. I think they've been really great at regulation. I think they've been really great at PR. I think they've been really great at building an advisory board.
Right.
But we've really focused on the customer. We focus on technology. We focus on the actual market dynamics, and I think that gives us an edge in the industry.
And do you see yourselves as very different types of?
Fundamentally, we all do the same thing. I mean, even if you want to be overly simplistic, a sports book technically is a prediction market because at the end of the day, it's a binary option. If you're betting with, you name it, bookmaker, that technically is a prediction market where you can't trade. There's no open dynamic, so you can kind of think about them as simplified prediction market. So basically, we all do the same thing. At the end of the day, it's price, it's user experience, it's brand, and we put all of our energy into those aspects of trying to make a great user experience, tight bid-offer spreads, low transaction fees, and ultimately, I think that's what's going to drive success in this industry.
So you think it's a rising tide type of thing? The way you think about it, you think this space can just get bigger?
Well,
all of you,
the biggest movement is going to be trying to take sports betting from the traditional bookmaker world into the prediction market world. I think that's where 90% of the revenue is going to come from. I think that's worthy of disruption. I think bookmakers are giving customers an extremely unfair shake, and I think prediction market dynamics are the right place for sports betting to migrate to. Couple that with interesting markets on the future of news. Will the Strait of Hormuz open up? Those kinds of markets, and I think you have a winning product that can benefit people that want to bet on sports and people that care about prognostication of the future.
Okay. What's a big decision that you've made in the last 2 years that you're least certain is going to work out, especially in terms of the way this space is evolving?
Well, I would say, as a company, you have limited resources, so we have to decide which markets we're expanding to. We're taking a big risk on the CFTC rollout. America's a big country. My competitors have raised lots of money, and so that's a big risk for us coming into the American market. But as an American and as somebody that's been doing this for 20 years, I think we have an edge that our competitors don't do. We have a passion for this in a way that I think that they don't, and so it's a risk, but I think it'll work.
Why do you think they don't have a passion for it? I'm trying to understand.
Well, I think they kind of come at it from a little bit more of the, it's like the TikTok generation. It's the instant gratification, it's swiping, it's manic. It's manic. And I think at the end of the day, prediction markets, it's a financial market. It should be treated like an asset class. Just because New York Stock Exchange or CME can list a contract, they don't just throw up any contract that they want. There's a seriousness around it, there's a regulation around it, and I think it should be treated with the same deference.
Do you should we think about Smarkets as a standalone company for the future, or do you see yourself consolidating with other companies or players or other sort of sectors?
Are you offering to buy me?
Not this week. Not this week.
I would love to stay independent. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not, I didn't start this company 3 years ago. I love my job. I love my company. The people I work with, it's fantastic. And I think in a more broader context, what I'm really excited about, I think financial technology is just at the beginning. If you look at a lot of the traditional players, some of whom are probably in this room, a lot of traditional finance is expensive. It's hard to use. It's disconnected. And I'm really excited bringing technology to financial technology, and I think there's a lot to be done with that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Jason. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Yinka.
please welcome Adel Al-Saleh of SES, Ziad Dalul of Afrisil Group, and Alexis Akwagiram of Semafor.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Adel and Ziad. I'm thrilled and excited about this conversation. We're going to focus on telecoms and satellite connectivity in Africa. Adel, I wanted to start with you and just talk about the trends that you're seeing with your satellite company across Africa. Like, is there growth, and what is driving the trends that you're seeing?
Well, look, we've been in Africa for a period of time, and we do two major things. One is we deliver TV to Africa, to tens of millions of people. That business is either stagnating or declining because of the internet and broadband introductions to Africa. And then the other part of our business is connecting the unconnected, right? So broadband across difficult terrains, difficult areas to reach, conflict zones, connecting schools, hospitals, etc. And that business continues to grow. That is what's driving growth.
And then, I guess the same thing for you as well. In terms of Africell, Ziad, you operate in a number of countries that people might perceive as being risky, for example, DRC, Angola, and then also Sierra Leone. So my question to you is, well, you've been doing this for 25 years, you founded this company, it's US-backed. What's driving the trends that you're seeing? And then also, on the issue of risk, how do you manage that risk and the risk perception?
So yeah, we've been operating for 25 years in the continent, and we're very comfortable with the risk. And as Adel said, we have the same objective, is to connect the population. More than or around 50% of the African population is not connected. So we do our best, and sometimes we do complement each other to reach out to the most remote areas of the countries. But each country has different challenges.
Yeah.
So our first operation was in Gambia. It's easy, it's flat. You can cover it almost 100%, 99.9% in terms of geographical coverage, and it isn't that challenging to cover. Of course, there'll be other challenges in this part of Africa, which is you need to give them fast internet, and the population does not necessarily afford it. So you have to come up with ways to offer them something that is affordable. In places like Sierra Leone, there are other challenges. It is mountainous. It has to reach some of those sites. You need to go across a mountain, carry all these things. Sometimes there are rivers, exactly like you see in movies. But also you get used to it.
Yeah.
In DRC, it's totally different. You have rainforest. You have you're talking about a territory that is as vast as Western Europe. So yeah, definitely here in this case you need all you can get: satellite, fiber optic, anything. In terms of risk, we don't feel that these jurisdictions are risky, especially after 25 years of operating in those places. The world is becoming smaller and smaller, and everyone knows about everything that goes on in the government. And now we see that Africell's got a bond, and when Africell got a bond, the Eurobond, and we see that DRC got one, the government of Angola also got one. So somehow we also share the same investors, and thus the risk becomes
and it becomes manageable ultimately. Yeah. I mean, I think part of what you've described there, it's really struck me is the pace of change and disruption in both of your industries, and that makes me think about the most disruptive force in your industry. I would say actually, Adel, is Starlink. So, I mean, how do you manage that? How Starlink changed the landscape? How has it changed the landscape in Africa? And are they competitors or are they partners? How does that work?
That's a good question. Look, Starlink has done an amazing leap in the industry, right? They've changed fundamentally how the industry works, how we innovate, how long does it take us to innovate, what should it cost to build a satellite, how do you deploy to a consumer, fundamentally changed the industry, which I think was very healthy, because the industry has been kind of stable and did things the way they've done for forever. For example, it takes 5 to 7 years to actually bring a new constellation to market, from the time you have an idea all the way to when you launch it and you operate it. I mean, Starlink changed that. You could do it every year. Right? Our relationship with them is quite sophisticated. On one hand, we're a very big partner of SpaceX. We were the first company, the first commercial company in the world to go on Falcon 9. There was no other commercial company that were launching their own satellites. Then we're the first commercial company to go into a reusable Falcon 9. So we have a special relationship. We can get access to space quite easily, but we compete on Starlink in some certain areas. What they've done great is a consumer enablement. You can buy a smart terminal, you can turn it on, it's quite easy and so on. But it's not cheap, right? So it works very well in developed countries where somebody can pay a couple of $100s for a terminal and can pay $50, $60 for a subscription. Our approach is very different. We don't really go to consumers, we go to governments, we enable villages. We create hotspots in a school, in a hospital, and that requires partnership with governments. Right? So instead of going to a consumer, we go to governments, we go to telcos, we work with them to enable communities. Right? And our next generation satellites, which we'll be launching over the next couple of years, will go down to a smaller terminal than can be used for a consumer. But look, they're incredible competitor, driver of innovation, which is what you need, right? If you have good competition, you're going to be on your toes and you're going to try to do better, and we'll love that.
And how do you try to how do you compete with them? Can you compete with them in price, or is it just a different lane because
you can't compete with them in price because they have access to capital that very few companies actually can afford. We pick our segment. So, for example, our customers now believe in a multi-orbit requirement. I mean, space has become a war domain, right? It is very contested. It's very difficult. And people need resilience in their networks. The way you get resilience, you go into multi-orbits, right? So you have a LEO orbit, which is where Starlink, Amazon are existing. That's where they're building. The Chinese are coming into there as well. We are in MEO and GEO, right? GEO has the benefit of being the highest in space, can cover very large parts of the Earth. MEO is very close to LEO, and therefore latency and speed and broadband is very, very strong, but we don't need as many satellites because we're sitting above the LEO, so we can see more of the Earth. So we compete by picking different segments where we can differentiate, where we can have a value, and when we can demonstrate to the client, if you want a resilient network, in today's world you do, because what's happening right now in the Gulf is, the first thing that was hit is the infrastructures. Yeah. Right? You need that resilience in the network to be able to deliver service.
And on that, I mean, you're talking about resilience and infrastructures. That makes me think as well, for you, Ziad, so much of the digital infrastructure across Africa is actually Chinese. Think of the influence of Huawei, the presence. If we think about the essentially economic revolution of the 21st century, that the backbone, the digital backbone of that is Chinese. Now, Africell is US owned, at one point was DFC backed. How do you manage that relationship? Does it create challenges for you, and can you see it creating challenges for other companies, not just necessarily Africell, but other telecoms companies in the future?
Not really. We've been doing business with Motorola until the last day before they closed shop. So it isn't the Chinese who took over. It is us, the West, who allowed them to take over, because we stopped manufacturing those equipment. We stopped doing anything got to do with mobile and started using their equipment. So then they started taking over, and they got the largest market share. So Africa is of no exception. They took over, and most of those markets are dominated by the Chinese. So what we did is we in anything that is new, we're going with Nokia, as Nokia is the only one from the West that's competing in the continent. Ericsson is more focused on the US. Both Nokia and Ericsson are in North America. And the Chinese, they have the advantage, but we're trying as much as possible to swap into non-Chinese. For instance, in Angola, we have all 100% non-Chinese. In DRC, it wasn't the case, but every time there's expansion, we thought that we want to do something like 15 to 20% each year swap to a non-Chinese.
And then another thing that's occurred to me when we're talking on this issue of infrastructure, there's an issue around latency. So for example, the use of AI has become ubiquitous in advanced economies and people take it for granted. But in poorer nations across Africa, the speeds are slower, the technology is going to be more expensive, it's just going to be harder for people. How do you work around that in terms of offering services with regards to AI to ensure that your consumers in Africa are not being left behind?
Yeah, so believe it or not, in all of our operations, even the most remote base station has got 4G. And in the major city, we're going 5G. So speed problem is not a problem in our markets. And as for AI, AI has got as a network operator, we're using AI in our optimization. We're using AI in the self-healing networks. We're using AI even for the customer experience, where they have a digital assistant, AI bot. We have our own AfriGPT.
What's AfriGPT for the uninitiated?
So it's like the chat GPT,
okay.
but for AfriCell subscribers.
But isn't there some kind of innovation whereby it's based on SMS, it's text?
So it facilitates our subscribers the usage of depending on their handset. Mm-hmm. Some of them they're not blessed to have the latest, so we try to bridge this gap.
But that's the key issue. I mean, that's essentially what I'm pointing to, is where people can't afford the most expensive handsets, the workarounds that you can employ, and that's one of them.
So it was a bigger problem in maybe 2-3 years, but now we see smartphone getting cheaper, mm-hmm. and becoming affordable, and then we have programs where we can finance it for our subscribers. It is getting there. It's not becoming any problem. But again, 5G now we're using in some spot 5G, and 5G is taking over fiber optic.
Okay, and so it sounds like in terms of the trends that are driving telecoms in Africa, it's about affordability and the technology is becoming cheaper. I wondered with you, Adel, what are the trends that you're seeing in terms of what's driving the growth? What in terms of the technology and the innovation, and specifically your plans for expansion? What can you tell us?
Well, if you look at the satellite industry and space in general, it doubled in size over the last 10 years, right? It went from 300 billion market to 600 billion. The projection is that in the next 10 years it will triple, right, going to 1.8 trillion mm-hmm. As a market. And if you look at some of the valuations we're talking about, I think that's underestimated.
And why will it triple?
Well, the last decade, we used space to make things work on Earth, right? Connecting things and making sure that we complement telcos where we need to. We, use specific communications where telcos can get to in the middle of the oceans and in the air and in hard-to-reach areas. The next decade is we're going to be building space economy. And space economy means, we talk about data centers. AI is going to be in space. I mean, we're exploring manufacturing capability in no-gravity environments, right? We'll look at pharmaceutical companies that are looking at ways of developing drugs. We're exploring data centers in space, right? These are all real things, right? They are not... but the biggest driver, if you think about that, right, is governmental use. As I said earlier, space has become a war-fighting domain. Right? There is an incredible race on making sure that each nation, right, has the sovereign capability to have communications, to have intersatellite links, to be able to move data in space in order to enable things on Earth and be on the forefront of space economy. And that's driving billions and hundreds of billions of investments into space.
And when you
what happened with Artemis 2, by the way, that's pretty cool as well.
Oh, it's very cool.
Right? So imagine going back to the moon, right? You need infrastructure. You need communication highways. You need infrastructure on the moon. How do you communicate back to Earth? It's all going to be done through satellites and space infrastructure.
I just wanted to check one thing. When you said we are exploring, for example, manufacturing in no-gravity environments, did you mean SES or just mean in general?
Industry in general, and SES is involved in that, which we're working with some of our partners in putting what we call hosted payloads on our satellites that could do things. Like, space computing is real today, right? So for us, our existing generation of computers have onboard processors. They have memory. When we capture, for example, images of Earth by very specialized satellites that are not SES, we move these images to our satellites, process them, and be able to take actions. And so that's the evolution that's happening and connecting between different constellations. So SES talking to Starlink, to Amazon, to other players in order to move data around the world. So that's what's driving the investment in space.
And then with AfriCell, what are we looking at in terms of plans for expansion, new products? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so before, AfriCell Angola is also involved in satellite. We have a JV with the Angolan Space Agency, and what we do is we have the GEO data center, the only one in the region, and it provides a lot of services. One of them is monitoring for the oil companies any spill, and other things for agriculture and for taxes, many things. But also we're proud to be partnering with Hello Trust, and those are the guys who are doing all the demining in Angola. And so we provide them with all the imagery and process it for them, and which allow to save lives. So that is AfriCell, other than the mobile
Space
business.
Well.
Yes, and satellite.
And we've got just under a minute left, but quickly, any plans for entering new markets or acquisitions as a way to grow and expand your footprint on the continent?
Both, and we're working on an acquisition, and we're being offered a greenfield license. We're looking into both of them, and probably around end of this year, early next year, we will have 1 to 2 new markets.
And where?
Same region.
Okay. So expanding in the current regions that you're already existing in.
No.
Excellent.
Other than that, we're doing a lot of huge expansion across all of our markets, 4G everywhere, expanding 5G, doing a lot on the customer experience. We're converting our shops for it to become everything from it will be not only to provide connectivity, but also fun experience, music, cafe, fashion, artist, NBA partnership, all of that, and neobank services, all of that in one shop. That is
relentless
a telecom company doing it in these markets.
Excellent. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Welcome Chris Lehane of OpenAI and Reid Albergotti of Semafor.
Chris, thanks for being here.
It's so good
Irrelevant.
It's so good to be here. I'm number 384 of the last couple of days, the very last. The NFL draft is next week. I'm Mr. Irrelevant for this conference, so thank you.
All right. So let's get serious. I've got a serious question.
Really?
There was, you might have heard this attack on your CEO's house in San Francisco. The person who did it was, part of a lot of these like AI, sort of anti-AI groups, it seems, who you've sort of called out for raising the temperature, et cetera. My question to you, though, is can we ever, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Can you reverse this anti-AI sentiment?
Yeah, reading Willis Reed, I love history, and I think if you do look back, the last 10,000 years of sort of human engagement with general purpose technologies, the wheel, printing press, combustion engine, electricity, transistor, you do see a similar pattern where you have to go through this transition period. And one of the things that we really see and track, we have nearly 1 billion people who use our tech on a regular basis, that those people who use the technology, have a very favorable view of it, particularly those who are power users. And so, there's going to be more people using this tomorrow than there is today, and more the day after that. And as more and more people use it and experience the incredible benefits that comes with this, whether it's education, science, healthcare, just productivity, I think the more you'll see that sentiment begin to shift. Now, I also think that companies like ours, have to really participate in that conversation. There's challenges that come with this, like there was with the printing press. There's huge opportunities that come with this. But I think ultimately, I think the answer to your question is, when do people begin to feel like they're getting a piece of this, that they're personally benefiting from this in some way? And I do think that comes along with the adoption.
Yeah. I didn't know about the anti-wheel sentiment when it first came out.
Yes. Well, the market's really underpriced the wheel.
So this town well. You earned the nickname. I think it was Master of Disaster, right? I
had a lot more hair then.
You've worked for Airbnb and you did a lot for the crypto industry. You're very good at what you do. You get great results for your clients. But I wonder if that comes at a cost. If you win on the legislative regulatory battles, but then make some enemies, detractors along the way. What do you think?
Look, for me, the commonality in everything that you just mentioned is using technology in a way that democratizes the opportunity to participate in the economics that technology can drive. So, Airbnb was a platform that allowed hosts who are typically middle-class people to use what was typically their greatest expense, their home, to make additional money. Crypto, digital assets, for me, is the democratization of the financial markets, of currency, of capital. And amongst the reasons I came to OpenAI is really, our co-founder, CEO, Sam Altman's vision and belief that if you're going to build this technology that really does advance humanity, benefits all of humanity, it fundamentally has to be done in a democratic way. It has to be democratized. The vast majority of the nearly 1 billion people who use this on our platform are using it for free. Right? We are owned by a nonprofit. In effect, the public basically owns 30% of OpenAI, so sort of participating in the upside. But this technology really is only, going back to your first question, do people feel like they can participate in the economic opportunity here? This is a general purpose technology. It will drive productivity gains. And I think the real issue here is, do as many people as possible participate in this? Yeah. And as you know, we released a document a couple of weeks ago, a national industrial policy that had some pretty big ideas and I think this is one of the key things here.
Let me ask you about those, but I think I was more like, for instance, there's a law in Illinois that's you're, I think, lobbying for, where it'll shield the frontier model companies from liability if there's catastrophic harm from their models. That kind of stuff, I think, raises these questions of well, should you be shielded from liability?
So what we're promoting and trying to do across the different states, California and New York within the last year passed laws that create standards. We think that there should be national safety standards for AI, but in the absence of the federal government being able to take action, right? There's a lot of political challenges to do anything here at this moment in time. We have supported trying to get the different states to begin to sort of mirror each other and, in effect, do a version of reverse federalism, right? If you get Illinois, New York, California, some of the other big states, to basically all mirror one another in terms of those national safety, in terms of safety standards, you effectively are going to create a national safety standard.
Yeah. One of the, and to your economic point you were making earlier, there are these, this came up at this breakfast this morning, there are these places where there's stranded power, these old industrial towns that have a lot of power, not a lot of industry anymore. There could be data centers there, chip fabs, like in, I think they're doing that in Syracuse. Doesn't exactly create a ton of jobs, but there's an interesting idea around there where you could sort of use that as almost like Alaska uses oil. I think you mentioned that in the paper.
Alaska Permanent Fund.
Just really quickly to describe this idea, because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think obviously you can get jobs from the construction of these data centers. There's people who work in the data centers. The data centers themselves can sort of impact property taxes and that type of stuff. But I think there's a much bigger idea here and much bigger play here, which is, can these data centers in effect become hubs to actually support, an AI ecosystem in that particular community? Do you potentially find ways for folks to actually participate, like the community itself, participate in the economics of that AI data center? Do you maybe think of creative ways where you make some portion of the raw computing power that is going to be the most valuable asset in AI available either for people to potentially, participate as owners, or maybe to help support the public education system, the local school system, local community colleges? I think there's a variety of ways. And look, I think ultimately, if you're going to get support on the ground in these communities, right, to pass votes to allow these data centers to be built, they are going to want to feel like they are benefiting from it in a meaningful economic way that will make a difference in their lives.
One thing you've done to try to get the word out about these ideas is you acquired this TBPN show, which is very influential in the tech industry.
Are you going to make an appearance on it?
What's that?
Will you make an appearance on it?
I mean, yes, I accept your invitation. I'll be on there tomorrow. One of the big distribution channels is X, formerly Twitter. It's owned by Elon Musk, not exactly the best friend of OpenAI, even though he's a co-founder. I have heard that that X is throttling TBPN now. Have you heard that, and does that bode well for the chances that it will continue to be the big platform that you want it to be?
Well, first of all, I look forward to the Semafor reporting on this subject.
It's happening now.
That's good. See, we're real time. It's getting reported on as we stand here. I mean, look, I think that TBPN, for those who aren't as familiar with it, is a 3 to 4 hour program that goes on virtually every day. It has about an audience of 70,000 folks who are sort of the real center of Silicon Valley: the builders, the engineers, the researchers, the investors, CEOs. And amongst the reasons that we acquired it, and by the way, like part of the acquisition was building into the actual contract that they maintain and retain their editorial independence, is we are at a moment when there are more and more people actually wanting to really learn about AI. The conversation is reflective of that. And these guys do an incredibly good job of unpacking the what, the how, and the why. They may not be breaking news in the way you just broke news, but they do break down how and why this technology matters. And in a moment when more and more people are looking to learn about that, we do think that they can be an incredible asset, and just that pedagogical, educational component that I think is really needed right now.
Does it worry you at all if the people are going to say, oh, it's owned, but even though they're editorial independent?
Well, you began by talking about X. People seem to be on X a lot, right?
Fair point.
And look, there's a long history of companies having an interest or owning media properties. I actually think this one is maybe a little bit different, and I'll use an example that may or may not translate here in this room. But in the 1980s, Apple brought in its outside marketing agency, which is Chiat Day, which had made that 1984 commercial. And they created something inside Apple, which became known as the Media Lab. And it really changed how companies marketed. They actually started to build their marketing in as the products were getting produced, like at the ground level. And so a number of things that people just sort of take for granted today in marketing was really done through creating that lab inside Apple. And for us, I think there is a version of this where in a world, and look at Semafor as a great example of this, that is content first and then digital forward, where people are just getting their information through different channels and in effect giving other people information to then become communicators through their own channels. that this is a version of us sort of building in a 2026 version of that media lab, and maybe at some point 20 years from now, 10 years from now, someone will be on the stage with you, you'll still be around, talking about this example.
What are your naming ideas for your version of Media Lab?
I don't know. Maybe we can crowdsource that.
Happy to help. Maybe when I go on the show.
Yes.
Couple more questions. I think one thing, I've written about this a bunch. The Anthropic Pentagon fight. Mm-hmm. They got pushed out. You stepped in. Got a lot of criticism, I think, from some of the industry that you sort of, caved to that, which you deny. Why do you think the Pentagon is okay working with you?
Well, I think first of all, when we struck our agreement with the Pentagon, we built in a whole set of provisions that really went beyond anything that had existed before then. I think there was probably a little bit of a different dynamic in the sense that we were not already engaged with the Pentagon and so had the ability to really negotiate this. Whereas I think in their case, they had already been working with the Pentagon under an existing contract that they were in the process of renegotiating. So we actually had the opportunity to go build in a bunch of provisions that had not previously existed. But I think there's really, if I could, almost a bigger issue, I think, reflected in all of this, and you see it, even in the conversation about cyber right now, which is, very much an issue, this is the first technology of this kind and of this power, at least in modern memory, that is being built by the private sector. It's a dual-use technology. We ultimately are doing this in a democratic society, and it's inconceivable to me, and I think really, from an OpenAI perspective, that as we move forward, that we're not going to have to be working closely through the democratic process, in partnership with government. Yeah. And again, I think you're really seeing this play out, right now on the cyber front. We just announced a model a couple of days ago, 5.4 cyber. Yeah. And part of what we're doing, we've certainly talked and consulted with the government, but we're also created a program to really create fairly broad access. Not just our commercial partners, but other folks to be able to participate in this so that they can get access to this technology almost as like a public infrastructure benefit. And I do think you need to think about this technology on scale as a public infrastructure. And when you think about cyber, yes, the federal government has a ton of issues in front of them. Private sector entities do, but in particular, like state and local governments, where there's this hodgepodge of private sector and public sector that sort of support critical infrastructure. And like there needs to be mechanisms to get this technology to those places as quickly as possible. And you have to do that through a democratic process.
A few minutes to talk about my favorite subject, tokens. You last year got a lot of flack. OpenAI got a lot of criticism for just being reckless, buying up all this data center capacity. It's way too much. Now it actually, I think we're seeing that the demand was there, it is there. You look pretty wise, I think, for doing that. But the question I have is, how much of an advantage does that translate into over Anthropic, let's say?
Yeah, look, I think it was a huge strategic decision made by Sam and Greg Brockman. I think they understood that infrastructure is destiny and that ultimately in the intelligence age, intelligence is going to converge with compute. And the fact that we are on course to have 30 gigawatts of compute by 2030 puts us in the position to be able to continue to make this technology available widely for free for many people. It puts us in the position to be able to make this available to enterprise clients, at a lower cost. I mean, we've seen in the last week or so, others are having to throttle back their agentic AI. We're actually expanding how many tokens you can get access to for the same price point or for a lower price point. But I think where the real advantage will come, I mean, if you think about how we look at it, for every quantum of compute that we get, we get a 3x in revenue, because what happens is that quantum of compute drives innovation, innovation drives users, users drive revenue. But I think the most important part of this is that if you look at general purpose technologies, they typically go through platform changes. Transistor led to huge mainframes, right? Mainframes created the internet. The internet then created desktop and then laptop and then mobile. right? Those were all major platform changes that had huge economic implications. But they were over, depending on which one you want to pick, 10, 15-year increments between each one. I mean, a year ago, no one had really knew what agentic AI was, right? Before that, it was reasoning. You're seeing these platform changes taking place in AI in an exceptionally compressed time period. And the only way you can be at the front end of those platform changes is if you have access to the compute and you're on the frontier of that, because then you're driving the innovation.
Right, because, yeah, I hadn't thought of that where, you're looking at the shift from reasoning to agentic scaling, like desktop to mobile, which is fascinating. And I think the other thing that's buried in that point is, so more tokens equals more capability. So it actually changes the product, not just the supply.
The raw computing power allows you to actually change the underlying nature of it. Remember, ChatGPT came out, and that's what people thought AI was. And then you got reasoning. That was a different form of it, right? Now you have agentic AI. That's going to continue to evolve, but it's evolving in a much shorter time frame. And so you need that access to the compute if you're going to be leading that.
So you've said 2030. So does that mean that the fight now is how much capacity can we get in 2031? Is there a battle between all the companies?
I think that compute is always going to be the most finite resource. And so for us, it is core to our strategy, continuing to be able to identify and lock in that compute as we go forward. It's also of huge importance to whether you want to have small d democratic AI or autocratic AI, right? There are two countries in the world that can build this at scale, the US People's Republic of China. I think we did about 55 gigawatts of energy in the US in total last year. China did about 450 gigawatts. Electricity drives compute. We as a country are going to need to be able, we don't have to match it gigawatt to gigawatt, but we do need to be in the ballpark. And that comes back to, this is a huge opportunity, could be a huge catalyst for the reindustrialization of the country and doing it in ways that we talked about earlier, right? You start to build these data centers. They're not just data centers. I mean, look, you get really good jobs building these. I mean, we're going to need 20% more building trades folks than we currently have. We have a partnership with the building trades to actually try to grow those. Those are good jobs. But if you actually can figure out ways, as we touched on, for these communities to then build out these ecosystems, there's just this enormous opportunity. I mean, I get really excited. It is an enormous opportunity to reindustrialize the country, and in so doing, also make this technology really available to a broad swath of people.
That went by way too fast. Thank you.
Mr. Irrelevant, thanks for having me.
Please welcome co-founder and CEO of Semafor, Justin B. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you so much. At least backstage, we're saying three words. We did it. We did it. We crossed this finish line totally exhausted, exhilarated, excited, maybe even, I think, ecstatic on some level, but also very deeply humbled and I think in awe of the collective kind of energy that propelled us forward this week. And that means all of you, all of the people working backstage, every human being in this building these last 5 days, I think, contributed to some sort of force which made this such a special 5 days. And the first thing, of course, that we see when we cross the finish line is the starting line. Semafor is a company that is made up of 110 individuals, distinct individuals, and the 110 of us, and we're growing quite quickly. We're on a mission, and that's why the starting lines are almost every morning. There's a new starting line, and every hour there's a new starting line. And the mission that we are on is that we intend and hope to build the world's leading, independent, quality news brand that is actually trusted all around the world, from capitals in Asia to Europe to Latin America to the Gulf. And we're on our way. We're just a young company, but that's what we want to be when we grow up. We also are on another mission, and this is related to this project, to build the world's most important, most consequential CEO gathering and convening here in Washington, D.C. And of course, this was a big step for us this year. And I just want to thank all of you for helping us make that big step. But I also want you to help us take the next step and start that next starting line. In fact, next year's event will be on April 12th through 16th, 2026. At one of the private dinners, David Rubenstein, who's one of our co-chairs and is so funny, he made a joke and he said, did you hear that Semafor World Economy has gotten so big that the IMF World Bank are now scheduling their meetings around what they do? Anyway, okay, so finally, just really want to express some truly heartfelt and profound appreciation for so many people, for all the speakers who are wonderful, our commercial partners. There are about 35 or 40 commercial partners. The CEOs and the CEO teams, 501 CEOs, the government leaders who joined us, 25 G20 finance ministers. The audience has been just wonderful and so engaged. We appreciate that so much. It's a big, big part of an event like this. And so thank you for that. The Semafor principals who made up the audience, the Conrad staff, when you come through and come on stage, you walk through the kitchen and you see all these just incredibly hardworking people sort of making food, and here are all these guys walking through with suits on and disrupting their work, but there's smiles all the way, and just a lot of positive energy. Our partners, our collaborators, the security teams. We had a massive security operation here. You know how CEOs are vulnerable, right? But it's not easy to be a big CEO of a company. You saw what happened, a few months ago, and so we put a lot of energy into that. Stratus has been an amazing partner. Thank you. TSE has been an amazing partner, and then finally, of course, the Semafor staff, and I think down to a person. The Semafor staff literally delivered brilliance, excellence, creativity, flawless organization and management, which all adds up to, we talk about this a lot at our company, exquisite execution. But they did it with the Semafor smile and the Semafor spirit of delivering against the highest standards in the world together, in locked arms formation of trust, kindness, and joy. So thanks.
Great work. Can we get this mic off?